We talk a lot about whole foods here on the show, and some of the big areas that get a lot of attention, especially now as this is really becoming more mainstream. Never thought I'd say that, but it is, especially on social media, are the areas around seed oils, raw milk, grass-finished meats, pastured poultry, all those things. Those are getting a lot of attention. And those are really important and definitely ones that I focus on a lot. But there's another area in this world of whole foods and eating more naturally that's really easy to overlook, mostly because it's probably one of the least fun ones to address. And that is the topic of sugar. And I know that this is something that has been a pain point for me over the years. I definitely have a sweet tooth. I have dabbled in the world of feeling like, sugar can be a little addictive, and how do we balance that? And how do we balance that with this idea of eating a whole foods or a homestead diet? And so when today's guest reached out, I was super excited to have her on and have a conversation about this very topic. So I'm joined by Melissa Dowbiggin today. She is the sugar-free coach, and she is on a mission to empower women to break free from sugar cravings, reclaim their energy, and just live more vibrant, healthy lives. After years of battling her own sugar addiction and feeling trapped in a cycle of fatigue and yo-yo dieting, Melissa has transformed her life with nutrient-dense foods and a sugar-free lifestyle. So I'm excited for this conversation. I'm hoping to get some good strategies from it today. I know we will. And welcome, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
It's going to be good. So I'm just going to dive right in because that's just what I like to do. When I think about this topic, one of the things that rings through my mind the most, and one of the things I hear a lot, and I might have even parroted it over the years, is that people say sugar is addictive. And I've heard some people say it's addictive as cocaine. I don't know. That feels like a little bit of extrapolation, but is this true? What are sugar's effects on the body? Kind of give us this high level view of what's happening when we consume the types of sugar we're consuming as modern standard American people.
Okay. There is a lot of controversy with this topic, but sugar is addictive, and it has been proven time and time again that it is addictive. I know a lot of people have seen those like side by side photographs of like your brain on cocaine and your brain on sugar, and it lights up those same pathways. Now, what's happening in the brain is that when you eat anything addictive, you get a dopamine release. And it lights up the brain. And over time, that addiction happens. You start craving it because you want that dopamine release. Your brain wants that. So with cocaine, you get a really intense dopamine release. It's really intense with any hard drug. It's a really intense dopamine release. It's not quite like that with sugar, but there's still a high release. And it's still addictive, but it's not going to make you high. Like
sure,
drugs will make you high, but it's going to make you feel good. And then your body's going to just crave that time and time again. And then your brain actually becomes tolerant to it. So you're going to need more to have that same sense of pleasure. So with any food, there is any new food, there is a dopamine release. So if you eat like an apple for the very first time, you get a dopamine release and you feel good. But the more you eat that apple, that dopamine release tapers off. But you still continue to eat that apple because it tastes good and it's nutritious. With these refined sugars, and especially in ultra-processed foods, say a chocolate bar, you eat that chocolate bar and you get a high dopamine release. Now, the 100th time you eat that chocolate bar, you get that same dopamine release. It does not taper off over time. And that's what makes it addictive. That's why people keep going back to these ultra-processed foods, to these sugars, because they're truly addicted. Now, I won't say that everybody's addictive, because not everybody is addictive. But if you have that genetic predisposition or to, you have addiction running in your family, or you have maybe some trauma, or it can depend on your personality, then you do have the potential to become addicted to sugar, just like somebody can get addicted to gambling. But you wouldn't go and say like to somebody who is addicted to gambling, oh, just gamble a little bit and you'll be fine. Yeah. Whereas people who are truly addicted to sugar, what a big thing out there that people are being told is that just eat it in moderation and you'll be fine. That is really, really hard for a lot of people. Really, really hard for a lot of people. And it was really hard for me too. So that's how I got into it. Like, trying to understand sugar and what it was doing to my body and to my health, of course.
That's fascinating. I didn't realize the piece you mentioned about you get the same release of dopamine every time you eat it, whereas other foods it's going to be lessened. That makes a lot of sense.
Real foods, it's lessened.
It makes sense why it is so appealing to us and our palates, is because we're getting that dopamine every single time in that same quantity. So when we do feel good, when we have the chocolate bar or whatever, and we feel better, right? We feel like that's satisfying something. Is that primarily the dopamine that we're feeling, or is it doing something else in our body that's giving us that pleasure?
Well, it does a lot of things in our body, but of course it tastes good. But the dopamine, I would say, is the main thing. It may, sugar does raise our cortisol levels a little bit, which is going to give us a little burst of energy too. And just that sugar rush as well. So if you're eating just a chocolate bar and nothing else, that's glucose, that sugar is going to be broken down into glucose, and you're going to get a little rush of energy. Not without its consequences, of course, because that energy is short-lived. And even that dopamine response, where it gives you that sense of pleasure, that's going to be short-lived as well. And then, of course, people, they want to feel that good again. So they go back and they eat it, and they get maybe a little burst of energy again before they get a dip. And then their brain, of course, sends out that dopamine, and they feel good because of that. But those feelings with these ultra processed foods and with that chocolate bar are short lived. And then that's what makes people go back for more.
Fascinating. What, you mentioned genetic predisposition. Are there some people, like people say, including myself, I have a sweet tooth or whatever. Are some of us wired more towards actually getting more pleasure from sugar, or is it just may have those addictive personalities anyway, and sugar just happens to be the addiction of choice?
Yeah, I would say we have that addictive personality because of genetics or whatever. It can even come down to like your gut health as well. That has some relationship there. So if you have dysbiosis, you have an overgrowth of bad gut bacteria, you're going to crave just because of that. The little bad microbes are going to crave sugar. And that goes back to, what your mother ate while she was pregnant with you in the womb. Like, that affects gut health. And you can go even further than that. But genetics, a lot of people have, and I have it. I have an addictive personality. And I have those addictive traits. And so I have to be really careful with a lot of things because I can latch on to social media, no problem, and just get stuck on it. And then you feel like you need it. Same with sugar, same with a lot of different things. But, what you latch onto is going to be very person dependent.
Yes, absolutely. I think I have a little bit of that personality as well. And I've heard it said, I don't know if this is true, but I think about it. They say everyone has an addiction. It's just what we're choosing to feed it with. And sometimes I think addictions, and I use that very carefully and loosely, but they can be, or that predisposition towards being very intense about different things can be a good thing, right? Sometimes you can use that. Like, I try to use it towards exercise. Like, I like the dopamine I get from exercise. And so I use that to my advantage. But yes, I think I definitely have a little bit of that as well. And that's, I think, why sugar is so appealing to me.
Yeah, there are healthy addictions, and then there are unhealthy addictions.
Unhealthy ones, yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of people latch onto those unhealthy addictions and, don't go for things like exercise. But it does make you feel good. And yeah.
Absolutely. So I love looking at the big historical picture because I know our food supply and humans in general, we've not always eaten a lot of sugar and it's not a natural diet for us as humans. Mm-hmm. When did we start to see the shift in the industrial food complex to really adding the high amounts of sugar? Because I mean, I'm sure my listeners are familiar with the topic of, sugar in our food, and it's everywhere in the high fructose corn syrup, and it's hard to find anything, ketchup or condiments or bread or anything without sugar in it. When did that really start to become prevalent?
Well, the processed sugar was added into the food industry, I believe, in the 1700s. But people were eating about 4 pounds a year, and it has just increased and increased over time. And so now we're eating I think it's 180, something like that, pounds a year. It essentially equates to about a cup a day, which is a lot. And so when the sugar was added, I mean, the seed oils I would say the sugar and the seed oils were added into the food supply. Our health has rapidly declined, and we are in a pretty sad state of health as a society these days. Everyone I talk to has a health problem, has a health issue, has symptoms, and they don't know why they have symptoms, and they have maybe a diagnosed condition or not. But either way, they're dealing with some health thing, whether they know exactly what it is and they can put a name to it or not. They're dealing with something, and it's a lot of different things. But the food has a really big role in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, if someone's listening and they're like, ouch, this is hitting close to home. How does someone know if they are dealing with a potential, sugar addiction, or if they just are like most humans who we're going to like sweet things on occasion? How do we start to separate those two categories?
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good question. I have a sugar addiction quiz that I hand out to people for free. And it is based on the Yale Food Addiction Scale. Anybody can look it up. Yale created a food addiction scale, and it's, food addiction, sugar addiction, they can really go hand in hand. But I'll just read you a couple of questions that I ask people, or a couple of phrases that I ask people, so that they can know whether they're dealing with a real problem or not. So let me see. Do I eat when I'm not hungry, or not eat when my body needs nourishment? Do I have feelings of guilt, shame, or embarrassment about my weight or the way I eat? Is my eating affecting my health or the way I live my life? Do I eat well in front of others, or eat more and excessively when alone? Do my eating behaviors make me unhappy? Are there certain foods I can't, this is a big one for people. Are there certain foods that I can't stop eating after having the first bite? Just like that chocolate bar. Yeah. If you have a store of chocolate bars in your house, or you have a box of cookies in your house, can you eat just one? Or does that one single cookie lead to you eating half a package or a whole package, or even more than that? Because that's what a lot of people are dealing with, and they don't know why. And a lot of people are told it's something else. Maybe it's that they have control issues, and that's why they're binging on these foods, and because they're trying to, control their diet. But it's that dopamine hit that they're seeking, and it's the food that they're eating. It's never actually satiating them. So they can eat and eat and eat. And the hormones that tell you that you're satiated they're not there, because the food, the ultra processed food, is lacking in the right nutrients to tell your body that you're full.
Yes, that has been a huge learning curve for me. And I didn't realize it till I started eating a higher protein diet. And I've been trying to do that lately. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed, not foolproof, but almost, when I eat enough protein during the day, especially in the morning, I don't think about sugar the rest of the day. But if I'm lower, if I'm not eating enough, or I'm not eating a protein, or I just missed a lunch or whatever, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm wanting sugar. I'm wanting chocolate and whatever, anything sweet I can get my hands on. So does sometimes when we are craving the sugar, I know there's a lot of pieces there. There's the dopamine and there's the addictive personalities, but sometimes is it our body trying to tell us something else and we're just masking that signal and just thinking sugar instead?
Yeah, definitely. So maybe if we miss a meal, our body's just going to want quick energy, and maybe it's going to crave that quick energy source. And then your brain, of course, goes to that sugar, that those ultra processed foods or sugary foods or, whatever. It can also be that you're just thirsty. A lot of people think they're hungry when they're really just thirsty, because people generally are chronically dehydrated. They're not drinking enough. They're not getting enough liquid. They're not getting enough electrolytes. And so they think they're hungry when they're actually thirsty. And then a third thing that can happen is if you're not eating a good breakfast or first meal of the day, you're not eating enough protein, enough fat, and maybe you're having like a sugary breakfast. Maybe you just decide somebody has, cereal or pancakes, even if you're making healthy pancakes with that, and you're using whole natural sugars like maple syrup, you're still going to get a blood sugar crash from that if you're just eating a high carb and high sugar breakfast. And so that's going to make you crave sugar as well, maybe a couple hours after your meal or later on the day. And then it's just kind of, you get sent on this sugar cravings roller coaster throughout the day because your blood sugar went too high. And then as a result, your body releases insulin. And as a result, it drops too low. And then you start craving sugar. You start craving again because your body likes to be in homeostasis. It likes to, has a very narrow window of what it likes to be like. And so it's going to want to bring those blood sugar levels back up again because now they're too low. And so you're going to start craving sugar again. So there's a lot of different reasons why that happens, but every single time you're just going to be craving those sugary desserts and sweets. And yeah, I've definitely experienced that, the ups and downs. Like you said, if I start the day with a high carb, like simple carb sort of meal or a sugary breakfast, it's like all day long. That's where I'm stuck all day. So it's fascinating just to listen to your body when you start to actually pay attention. Hey friend, I'm interrupting this episode for just a second to tell you about something new that I recently discovered, and I think you might be interested. So here on the show, we talk a lot about ingredient swaps and how we can get back to the nutrients we're designed to consume without all of the industrial junk. And one of the ingredients that's super important that I think we often overlook is water. So obviously our bodies are made up primarily of water, and we're supposed to consume a lot of water during the day. Whether or not we do that is a whole nother topic. And beyond that, water can greatly affect the outcomes of some of your old-fashioned from scratch foods. I'm namely thinking of things like sourdough or lacto-fermented veggies. So I was really excited to discover AquaTrue, which is a reverse osmosis countertop water purifying system. Kind of a mouthful, but it's super cool because it filters out a ton of chemicals that are likely in your tap water that could not only be less than ideal for your body, but they may be messing up your homemade foods and you don't even realize it. This filter will take out the forever chemicals, think like PFAS, fluoride, chlorine, arsenic, nitrates, pesticides, and herbicides. And those last three are especially concerning if you live in an area with a lot of industrial farming because they'll get into the groundwater. And I think what I love most about it is it's a countertop purifier pitcher system. So you don't have to redo your plumbing. You don't have to hire someone to install it. You just take it out of the box and go. Honestly, my 11-year-old put it all together for me and it was super easy. So it filters out 15 times more contaminants than an ordinary pitcher. And I especially love the chlorine part because I wish I had a nickel for every time one of you have emailed me asking how to get the chlorine out of your water for your sourdough starter. So it can do that plus so much more. One filter lasts anywhere from 6 months up to 2 years. And if you have been buying bottled water, it will save you the same as buying up to 4,500 bottles of water. So it's a really good deal. And if you head on over to aquatrue.com, that's
homestead.com and use the code HOMESTEAD. You can save 20%. So head on over, check it out, and let's get back to the show. So give us a picture of what, like, if we stay on this kind of standard American diet, which is very easy to do, which is very high sugar. What are the health effects of that long term? I know diabetes is one that we think of first, but what else would we be looking at if we don't change our ways?
Okay, so diabetes, of course, insulin resistance, any of the metabolic conditions, which is diabetes or insulin resistance, high triglycerides, high cholesterol. Yeah, and then of course it's implicated in cardiovascular disease. It's in obesity. It's just in so much it's implicated. It can lead to gout and let me see here. I have a big list with me. Chronic fatigue syndrome, which is what a lot of people deal with these days because of high stress. Yes. But because of how sugar acts on cortisol, a high sugar diet also contributes to chronic fatigue syndrome. And then, of course, like ADHD and hyperactivity in children, allergies, asthma, brain fog. But because also it affects your gut health. So if you're eating a lot of sugar, it affects your gut health. So that can lead to autoimmune disorders, food sensitivities, because then you're damaging your gut. So anything that affects the gut can lead to mental health disorders, to the autoimmune disorders, to so it's implicated in so much. And for some reason, not everybody, like medical society, not everybody agrees with that. Not everybody thinks that, but there is proof out there, and there is proof that it affects your gut health and affects your body. And so it is kind of sad that there's such controversy out there because it's confusing for people, but it does have serious long-term health effects.
The controversy surprises me. It feels like it would be self-evident. I mean, just looking around us at our culture, looking at when the sugar started to increase in our food supply and looking at how it's not in, natural human diets in a hunter-gatherer sort of situation or a pre-industrial situation, it's not prevalent. So it's like, it feels like it's obvious that we're not only supposed to consume it in the amounts that we are. So yeah, it's surprising to me that the controversy is there. Although I'm sure there's some lobbyists and some things like that happening in that realm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. In the States, you guys I'm in Canada, so a little bit different up here, but it sounds like you might be moving in the right direction down there with,
yes.
With Trump being elected and, what is it? Robert F. Kennedy.
Yes. There's talking, I'm starting to see, we'll see. I'm optimistic-ish, but yeah, there's starting to be more chatter on the internet about topics that, I've been talking about for 15 years online. And now it's all of a sudden everyone's talking about it. I'm like, okay, well, maybe we're moving in the right direction. We'll see.
Yeah. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with that because it's I don't know. Everything's tied into big food and big pharma and everything's tied into that. So how much they're actually going to be able to take that down, because they can't. That would just be like, everybody's on a pharmaceutical drug. Everybody's buying food from the grocery store. Like, to see how much is actually going to change. Like, I'm really excited to see what's going to happen. But I'm not optimistic that everything's just going to get better all at once.
Yes.
And it's certainly not here in Canada. It's really interesting. The Canadian Diabetes, I don't know what it is like for the American Diabetes Association, but the Canadian Diabetes Association, I think it's just called Diabetes Canada, says right on their website that there is no clear evidence, there's no evidence that sugar is implicated in obesity and diabetes.
Oh my gosh.
It's insane. They say, and I don't know the exact wording that they use, but they essentially say that it's like false fake news.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Which is crazy, right? It is so insane to me that that's the information that we're giving people because, that is quite a clear cause of insulin resistance and diabetes.
Yeah.
There's no question about it.
I think that's just a great argument for no matter what your government is doing, where you live, have personal agency and use your brains. Because even if they're on your side or not on your side, like still do your own thinking, think for yourself. Cause it's crazy.
When it comes to health, we can't, we want to like give that responsibility to other people. We want to give it to the food industry. We want to give it to our doctors. We want to give it to other people, but that's going to lead you nowhere. You really got to take your health in your own hands if you want to be healthy. You can't rely on anybody else. You certainly cannot rely on the medical system or pharmaceutical drugs or whatever.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. So, okay. So we're talking about the effects of sugar and how to know if we're addicted, all those things. So let's say you're listening to this, you're like, I think I may have a problem. How do we start to get off? Because it is hard to stop eating it. And not only is it everywhere, but our bodies do fight us on that when we start to pull back from sugar. So, is it better in your opinion? Do you go cold turkey? Do you do a gradual wean off? What does that detox start to look like?
Okay. So really, that really depends on the person. I think going cold turkey works the best. But I like to kind of combine the two. I like to tell people to slowly wean themselves off, maybe over a couple weeks, and then go cold turkey for maybe a period of 21, 30 days. And when I say cold turkey, I mean, don't even have the natural sugars. So that your brain, because when that happens and you take away that stimulus that triggers a dopamine release, your dopamine receptors actually start to rebuild so that you no longer need that stimulus, so sugar, for healthy, regulated dopamine levels. So that's interesting. That's why 21 days is what is said. But of course, if people take out sugar for 21 days and they just add it back in like they had before, it's the same thing's going to happen.
Yeah.
So you need some long-term solutions as well. And so I like to tell people also they need to start having enough protein, especially animal protein, and from good sources, and enough healthy fats, because that is what satiates you. That's what triggers that hormone to tell that the hormone is called leptin. And that's the hormone that tells you that you are full and you are satisfied, and it tells you to stop eating. So with insulin resistance, and a lot of people are insulin resistant and they don't know it. In Canada, they say about 1 in 5 people. I've seen other studies that say about 1 in 3 people are insulin resistant and they don't know it. But insulin resistance and leptin resistance are related. So you can actually become resistant to leptin, and so you're not actually able to pick up that signal. But once you start eating real food, your blood sugar starts balancing. You eat good amounts of protein and good amounts of healthy fat. Your leptin's going to start working, and your brain's going to start regulating out. So enough protein, enough fat, and take that sugar out for a period of time. And then once you add it back in, then eat natural sugars. Eat natural sugars with a fat and a protein so that you're not getting blood sugar spikes. And then depending on the person, how addicted you are, you really have to be careful about how much you eat and how often you eat it, of course.
Because you can get that dopamine. This is totally unscientific. This is just how I'm thinking about, like, that dopamine receptor that maybe you kind of covered up while you were on your detox. You can kind of open it back up, and where it starts to talk to you more again.
Yeah,
where you're needing exactly. It. Okay.
Yeah. That can definitely happen where if you're truly addicted to that sugar and you start having too much of it. So maybe it's before you were eating too much chocolate, but maybe and that's kind of been like your go-to, and that's what your brain craves when it craves sugar. So you can figure out how to have chocolate maybe, but one that isn't as addictive to you. So maybe you can make chocolate yourself. It's so easy.
Yeah.
And maybe you can use a natural sugar, and you can make it a darker chocolate so it's not as sweet. The more sweet it is, the more it's the if you're using something like maple syrup or honey, like those are so much better, and they have antioxidants in them and they have nutrients in them. It's still sugar though.
Yes.
But it's not going to be quite the same as something like high fructose corn syrup that you find in these ultra processed foods.
Absolutely. Yeah. The homemade stuff isn't, for some reason, whenever I make homemade sweets, I know they're still like, they can still spike our blood sugar and they're still sugar, but it just is different than the candy or the stuff you buy prepackaged. It's just not quite as addictive feeling. And the part you mentioned about the satiating foods, I think is so important. And if people are transitioning into a whole food diet, I think that's one thing you'll start to realize is how much of industrial food is not filling. Like the chips don't fill you up, the breads don't fill you, nothing fills you up. And it just creates a cycle of needing more and more and more. And we end up having so much caloric intake. And so it's so unsatisfying at the end of the day. And
people
so that's,
Sorry,
go ahead.
People call it empty calories, which is a good term. They are empty calories, but you know what? It's actually like negative calories.
Exactly.
They're depleting you and they're taking away from your health. It's not just like nothing, just empty, you know. It's not just that it's not nutritious. It's actually damaging the body.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it's just, I was at the airport traveling a couple weeks ago and I forgot to bring my snacks that I normally bring. And like just trying to get through an airport, and I was hungry and I needed something that was quick. You like can't find anything that fills you up. Like it's so hard to find. Like there's one little corner with the like beef jerky that's like $39 for an ounce, but it's so hard to find anything in those locations or in any out in the world that is filling. And I just noticed, like I've talked about before here on the show, like the difference when you start making whole wheat bread. If you eat bread, like you can have one slice of whole wheat toast, home ground, 100% whole wheat, and it's like you're full. Like I don't want any more than that. I'm totally good. But I could eat like 5 slices of store-bought, Texas toast white bread, if that's what I'm eating my toast as. And so it's just, it's so different when you start eating those whole foods. The cravings across the board, I think, becomes so much easier to manage.
Yeah, it's because it has that, when you're grinding your own flour and it's truly whole wheat, it has the fiber in there.
Yep.
It has fiber in there that like fills you up. Whereas even if you buy whole wheat bread from the store, it's like, it's still refined. It's like white bread mixed with a little bit of like germ and bran maybe, but then it has the vegetable oils and it's got probably added sugar. Whole wheat bread from the store does not compare at all to like
I agree.
A whole wheat bread that you make yourself. And maybe you're buying a flour, which is better. And of course, best is if you're able to mill your own, because then you're truly getting a fresh, you're getting all the nutrients that you can out of that. And you have the fiber in there. And even better, if you're able to ferment it, then that's really good for your gut and it makes it a lot easier to digest.
Absolutely. Well. Yeah, I feel like that's the golden rule. If you have the 100% whole wheat, ground fresh, and the sourdough, like, it's a little trickier to bake, but if you can get that dialed in, you're killing it. So
yes, yeah. I buy like a whole. I haven't been able to like make my own sourdough yet, so I buy it. And it's like $15 a loaf. It's so expensive. So I buy one a week and that's it. And it's whole rye and it's fermented and it's dense, but it's so good. And it's so filling and it has lower carbs because it has more fiber and it's got no sugar and it's just whole ground rye and then fermented to make it a lot less gluten and so much easier to digest. So it's not inflammatory.
Yeah.
So food quality really matters.
It really does. And paying, like you said, it costs more, but paying that, I know it's hard to swallow, especially everyone feels like the budgets are tight right now, but you're going to pay for it eventually somewhere, whether it's medication or medical visits or whatever, or paying for it now in the form of food, better food. Yeah. So,
yeah, exactly.
So what do you recommend people do when they start to detox, especially if they do like a 21-day cold turkey program? Sometimes the withdrawals are rough. Like you really start to crave it. What do you recommend to deal with that?
So you're gonna get symptoms. especially if you've been having a lot of sugar, you're going to get symptoms. But of course, there are things that you can do to make it a lot easier and to get through that time is, of course, just, everyday things like getting enough sleep and eating enough protein and fat. But also you want to be drinking lots of water. And one trick that I like to do with if a strong craving comes up is to just put a little bit of sea salt on your tongue. And that just like shuts down the food craving. And then of course, so there's another thing as well, is if you're drinking bone broth, if you're getting a really good bone broth, then that's going to help you through because it's really high in nutrients. It's going to give you a little bit of energy. It has electrolytes in there, but it also has an amino acid called glycine. And glycine is really important for regulating your dopamine levels. Oh. So that's going to help you through that detox period. And that's probably going to help regulate out your dopamine levels quicker if you're having enough glycine in your diet.
Okay. I know bone broth's amazing. I didn't know it did that. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that. Okay. So now I'm dying to know your thoughts on the different types of sweeteners. I know you mentioned the honey and the maple syrup. Those are better. I mean, and how I think of it, and tell me if I'm wrong, they still are going to, they're still sugar. They're still going to, they have a glycemic index still, but because they're less processed, I'm assuming our body handles them differently or digests them more slowly, or they don't hit our bloodstream quite the same way. Is that accurate or not?
It's still going to raise your blood sugar, just like any other sugar. Sugar, at the end of the day, sugar is sugar. But there are caveats to that a little bit, of course, like processed, refined sugars, they're going to have no nutrients in them at all. They're just going to be sugar and glucose. When you have natural sugars, some of them are, like maple syrup is slightly lower on the glycemic index. So it's going to be absorbed into the body a bit slower than, say, table sugar. But it has antioxidants in there, which protects you from DNA damage. So it kind of has a little bit of self-protecting properties to them. It's got vitamins, minerals, honey, of course, has enzymes, and it's antibacterial and antifungal and all these wonderful things. Honey is probably my favorite because it has so many good things to it. But of course, you got to get good quality stuff because especially honey and maple syrup, they're highly counterfeited. So if you can't just go out and buy any honey or maple syrup, because it might just be cut with high fructose corn syrup, and then where are you at? You're at the same place you were at before. But something like a raw or evaporated cane sugar juice is okay as well, and molasses, which has iron, and that's lower on the glycemic index. It's how often you eat these sugars, I think, is really important. So how often and how much you eat them. You still can't, just because it's a natural sugar, you still can't be, eating it on the daily. You still got to be careful about how much you eat, especially if you are dealing with a health condition. If you are dealing with a health condition, you might not want to have any for a little bit and just have fruit for that sweetness. But that really depends on the person and where their current health is at.
Sure, that makes sense. Okay. What about the stevia, the monk fruit, those that are supposedly, zero glycemic index? What are your thoughts on those?
So the sugar, stevia is pretty good. Mm-hmm. I don't mind stevia, but you got to get a green stevia leaf. Otherwise, it's really processed. You can go to the store and buy stevia, powdered stevia, and it's bleached. It's white. It's a leaf. Yes. It's supposed to be green. It's it's a stevia leaf. So you're going to get a bleached stuff, and even the liquid stuff, that's refined to some sort. It's still probably going to be better. It's going to be better than having, just sugar, table sugar. But it's still, because it's so sweet, it's still going to make you crave, especially if you're, you tend to crave sweets. You can overeat on that stuff and you're going to keep craving it if you continue to have it. But it is better. Monk fruit is, I would say it's similar. where it's sweet, but it's I believe it's a sugar alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, I believe it's a sugar alcohol, or we would consider it a sugar alcohol. Maybe I don't know actually, but it's often mixed with sugar alcohols like erythritol, where those aren't absorbed by the body, but they taste sweet. But the thing with those, with sugar alcohols in particular, is that they can cause digestive issues. So if you have too much of that, it's going to give you diarrhea. It's going to send you to the bathroom. And too much of that long term, well, then you get long-term digestive problems. And there was a study recently that was that implicated erythritol in colon cancer.
Oh, interesting.
So, but it's like, there's that. But then, of course, you can have, if you overeat sugar, it's bad. If you overeat sugar alcohols, it's bad too.
Sure.
But these things, I think, in moderation are okay, especially if you're dealing with a health condition, but you still want a little bit of that sweetness. Then in moderation, yeah, totally. Like people go on maybe keto, and I'm not, advocating for keto, but for healing purposes, if you're using it to heal, then it can be so beneficial. Like if people have gone on keto and use keto, there's lots of books out there that show you how to do keto for cancer. Mm-hmm. And they might include a little bit of these sugar alcohols or monk fruit as an alternative, but you still got to have them in moderation. That's the kicker. You still got to have them in moderation, maybe once or twice a week in a small amount, or in something homemade. You can't be having them every day, because then it is going to affect you.
That makes sense. I have often wondered about the ultra processed stevia, and there was just something about it. I'm like, this can't be good. I mean, the leaf feels fine and the crushed leaves feel fine, but I'm like, there's something about that white powder. I'm like, doesn't feel right. Yeah.
Once we start messing with food, once we take food and we start processing it, then it's just, it's not going to be as good as just if you just left it alone.
Yes.
And had the original food. There's a way of processing food that makes it just health depleting, not good. And then there's a way of processing food that is, beneficial, like fermenting.
Yeah.
It's a way of processing food, but you're like adding to it something good, not taking something away and making it bad.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Are there any natural remedies or herbal supplements that people could use to help support a sugar-free journey?
Bone broth, like I mentioned, is a really good one. There is a homeopathic remedy that is said to be really good for sugar cravings. And I wrote it down here because I never remember homeopathic names.
I don't either.
Let me see, where is it? It is argenticum.
Okay.
I can't find it. Anyway, starts with the word argenticum, but it is a homeopathic remedy, and that's supposed to help you get through those sugar cravings.
Okay.
So, argenticum nitricum. There we go. Argenticum nitricum. So
Perfect.
that could be a really beneficial, and homeopathic remedies are quite affordable. So that could be something really useful to help you get through a period, especially if you're going on a detox, to deal with really intense sugar cravings.
Okay.
Or help you maybe even over time deal with sugar cravings.
That's interesting. Have you had much experience or heard about, I'm going to probably pronounce it incorrectly, berberine terms of berberine? Yeah. Is that good? I've heard people I've seen some companies selling it as a supplement. It almost seems like a quick fix. And I'm like, that always makes me nervous. Is that effective? Is it safe? What do you think on that?
Berberine can help you balance your blood sugar levels. I think that can be beneficial in helping, especially if you are in that category where you're maybe insulin resistant or you're having these blood sugar fluctuations throughout the day, like energy crashes and you crave and whatnot. that can be really helpful because it does help you to balance your blood sugar level. It's not the only thing out there. I've been hearing it a lot lately, so maybe just a lot of people are talking about it right now, but that can be a good one. Bitter melon is another one that helps to balance your blood sugar levels as well.
Okay.
And then of course, like just, like the protein and fat, when it comes down to it, these supplements are only going to do so much if you're not eating the right food. So you got to be eating the right food.
Yeah.
And getting a nutrient dense diet. And then that will help you with your sugar cravings long term.
I know that has been hands down the biggest helper for me, is just eating enough protein and fat too, especially in the morning. It's been huge. It's way easier to do that than try to muscle through the willpower the rest of the day. That's pretty hard to do.
Yeah, willpower. A lot of people like to say like, oh, just have more willpower.
Yeah.
Well, when it's like your brain needs that dopamine, it no longer has anything to do with willpower.
Yeah. Nope.
It's nothing to do with willpower. It's just like an actual physiological thing.
Yeah.
If you have low blood sugar, if your brain's screaming because it wants dopamine, then it's a physiological thing and your willpower has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, and add a little stress in there on top of the low blood sugar, and it's like we're done. I'll eat whatever. Like I don't care. It's just like it's all over. So yeah. Understanding that physiological process I think is so key. Just so you know why your body's telling you what it's telling you. You're not just in the dark and a victim to the hormones and the cravings that are coming along. It's actually your body is telling you something. It wants to regulate out, but and that's what a lot of people like to say is just have more willpower, just say no. And that'll only go so far if your body is not in that state of homeostasis where it wants to be. Absolutely.
Screaming for sugar. You can't willpower yourself out of that.
No. Oh. You mentioned insulin resistance a few times. What would be the symptoms of that if someone's listening and wondering if they're in that area?
So you can have, severe, you might get heart palpitations and, sweating, and, you'll have these energy lows and highs, especially after eating sugar. If you hit like an energy low, that's like hypoglycemia. If you drink or if you eat sugar or drink sugar or whatever, and you get that high, that's hyperglycemia, and then your body responds by bringing it low, and you get into a state of hypoglycemia, and that's your body trying to regulate itself out, and then of course you're going to be having those symptoms. I would say the biggest symptom is just those irregular energy levels, the highs and lows that you get throughout the day. But then you can get dizzy and fatigue and get those heart palpitations and sweating and anxiety. Those are all symptoms, but it's going to be different for everybody. Okay. But it starts with those energy highs and crashes, energy highs from eating sugar and the crashes. Yeah,
that makes sense. All right. Yep, that makes sense. We're kind of winding down here, but I wanted to ask one more question. What are some strategies for, we're coming up onto the holidays for a lot of folks. It's easier-ish to do some of this at home. It's harder when you're at social gatherings, you're dining out, you're at parties. What are your strategies for mitigating the sugar in those settings?
So I like to tell people to just eat before you go, like have that protein, have a nice dinner before you go out to these events, lunch or dinner, whatever it is. Have your protein and have your fat and eat before you go so that you're not craving that sugar when you get there. But of course, if you need to take food with you, if you're actually in the camp where it's like, if I have a little bit of that and I will not stop eating it, and you don't want that to happen, just take food with you. Take maybe a dessert that you've made yourself to share. You can, take it to share, but you can stick to that because you know what's in it and you know the ingredients in it. But of course, if you want to eat all the food that's there, having already eaten is going to help you to eat less of that, especially if you've had that protein and you've had that fat. another thing that I like that not everybody likes is that you need to have boundaries for yourself around food. And a lot of people look at boundaries like it's a bad thing, like you're giving yourself these food rules, and that's going to make you crazy. But I think it's the opposite. When you don't have food rules, you're like, and you are addicted to sugar, that's just like giving your addiction free reign. You're just letting it go where it wants if you don't have boundaries in place for yourself. So that might look like, just abstaining from when you go to these Christmas parties or wherever. You might go with a boundary saying, I'm not going to eat those foods anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's not serving me and it's not serving my body and it doesn't make me feel good. And you need those boundaries in place for yourself. Everybody does. We give kids boundaries.
Yes.
We give ourselves boundaries for other things in life, but people are very afraid to put boundaries on themselves when it comes to food. But I think that is really important. Because then we get into this cycle of having too many foods that are health depleting, and that's just not good for us. And it's going to lead to a place that we don't want to be. And when you're going out to these Christmas parties too, like if you put the focus on the gathering, the people, as opposed to the food, then you're going to enjoy yourself more.
Absolutely. Well. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Great advice. So this has been excellent. Gave me lots of food for thought, no pun intended. And I know you have a lot of programs and resources. So can you point folks to those? Because I know a lot of them are going to want to take this to the next level after listening to our conversation.
Yeah. So if you're curious, if you want to know if you have a sugar addiction, I have a free sugar addiction quiz on my website. You can go to www.befreeandeat.com. You can also grab my 7-day sugar-free challenge. 7 days short, it's free, super easy to do. And that might actually help you see how addicted you are to sugar. Because once you take it out, then you can see how much those cravings, how intense those cravings are. So a short little challenge. I do have a 12-week program called the Sugar Craving Solution, and I'm going to be running that again. And that's a paid program, 12 weeks. And I help people to implement the things that we talked about, like balanced meals and food boundaries over the course of 12 weeks. And we go through a little bit of a detox period as well. And so I'm going to be running that again in January. So after that, Christmas time, when everybody's having all those Christmas sweets and whatnot, and they want to get control of their health, then that's when that's going to be running as well. And you can find all of that on my website at befreeandeat.com, and some of those free resources as well.
Wonderful. So everybody head on over to her website. You're going to have lots of good stuff over there. And just thank you so much for coming on today and having this conversation. I think it's a really important one that we don't talk about enough in the whole food and natural food world. So thank you for speaking to this. I think it's going to help a lot of people.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a really fun conversation.